And there we go. So make sure you all are muted so that we don't get a lot of feedback, and I'll do the same.
Hi, I'm Maureen Patan, founder and head trainer at What a Great Dog Training Center. My dog Jax and I are going to give you a few tips for happy harnessing. Our goal is to have a dog that's eager to have his own harness put on. Putting on a harness can be unpleasant, even anxiety-producing for many dogs. Often we're going to put on his harness in order to go for a walk, have an outing, or do a training session. In all of those situations, I really want a dog that's happy and engaged. You're going to want to get your dog's harness and open up the neck hole as wide as it will go. So by opening it up just as wide as it'll go, we're going to make for a really smooth process as we're teaching our dog to accept and even enjoy this simple procedure. You're going to need some treats, high-value treats. By that, I mean treats that are really yummy to your dog. In my pouch today, I've got a brand called Ravel. The pieces are a really nice size, and my dog really likes this treat, so it's a good choice for this exercise. You'll want to take your dog's collar off and have no leashes or anything on him, so you'll need to do this somewhere safe, ideally inside your house. And really, you're going to want to practice this when you're not in a hurry to go anywhere, where you're going to have a chance to really take your time with it. We're going to use a food lure for this exercise, so I'm going to practice that part first. What that means is I'm going to use a treat to cause my dog to move. So let's practice that. I'm going to put a treat under my thumb in my hand. I'm going to have Jax follow my hand, yes, and get rewarded for that. So we'll do a few of those. I'm going to start him over here. He's going to follow my hand, yes, and get that reward. Jax is very used to that. It may take a few more reps with your dog, but at the point that he's eagerly following your hand, you're ready to introduce the harness. An important piece of this is that I want the dog moving through the harness on his own. So rather than pushing the harness on him, I really want him coming through the harness. If he's doing the movement, he's going to feel much more in control and therefore a lot more confident about this, especially in these early stages. So I'm going to put my hand through the harness, and I'm going to lure him to come toward it, but I'm not going to ask him to come through yet. So we'll start over here. He comes toward the harness, yes, and then he gets rewarded. When your dog is really happily doing that, we'll do one more. Coming toward the harness, being rewarded. We'll be ready to ask him to come through. We don't want to rush that step. I really want him to feel like he's taking his time and that he's in control. This time, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ask him to come through. So notice that the harness stays still. I lure him through, he gets the reward, and then he gets to back out. Don't want him to feel trapped at all. You'll want to do several reps like that, where you lure the dog through the harness. Again, the harness stays still, dog gets rewarded for coming through, and then he gets to back out. When you find that your dog is coming through the harness and is happy in there, it's time to go ahead and reward him for holding that position. So this time, I'm going to lure Jax through. He gets the reward. And I'm going to reach and he's going to get another reward for being in the harness. Jax is thinking the harness is a pretty good place to hang out at this point, and that's exactly what I want. We'll go ahead and take it off and do a couple of those. Notice that he's not getting a treat after he's come out of the harness. He's quickly realized that when he's in the harness is when the treats are happening. So we've created a very positive association with putting the harness on. All right, Jax is pretty clearly happy with this, so we're ready to go to the next step. This time, I'm going to go ahead and snap the buckles. But I'm going to put it on him just like before, where he comes through the harness, I reward him, and then I'm going to do a little treat scatter on the floor, just right in front of him. While he's getting those treats, it's going to give me a couple seconds to get those buckles and to carefully snap the remaining buckles. Good boy. Once the harness is on, I want to reward him again. And I want to let him know that having the harness on is actually a pretty happy thing. So there may be some treats. They like attention. We may give a little bit of attention. Good boy. Good boy. Even a little bit of play is good. Excellent. That's how we create a dog that's happy to have his harness put on.
Alto treat.
Okay, any questions about that?
I have a question. So I clearly did this whole thing wrong. Is it too late? My dog is 2 to kind of go back in, because he wears a harness every day. Is it too late to kind of go back and start this over again to make him comfortable with the harness if he's been wearing one for 1.5 years?
But he's not comfortable with it?
No, he runs away whenever I touch it.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever too late to go back and rebuild from the ground up. Yeah.
I'll probably get it. I guess it would probably be better to get a new harness and start over instead of using the same harness.
I think that's a fabulous idea. That's actually what I was going to recommend. And if you have to walk him in a harness before he's learned to be comfortable, I would keep introducing him to the new harness. But if he needs to be in a harness before he's going, woohoo, I'm in the harness, then I would walk him on the old one.
Okay, perfect.
So that he draws a distinction between them.
Yeah, he's a brachiocephalic dog, and he's a polar, so I can't put him on a collar.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Anyone else? Any quick questions before we move on? All right, I'm going to go.
You lengthen the halter to make it easy for the head to go in. At what point do you shorten the halter so it fits their body?
So you would do it little bit by little bit. Okay. When he's really super comfortable with it where you have it, then you would tighten it up just a little bit. When he's throwing himself into it, then you tighten it a little more. So you want to always work within their success zone.
Okay.
Right. Sarah, anything to add?
No, but
okay.
we have a question in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
What if the dog bites the harness when it's in my hand?
That's an interesting question.
Or you want to put the box on your other device instead of
Pardon me?
Do you want to use your other device for chat?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I keep doing that. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I will endeavor to do that soon. I'll rely on your reading it for now. So I would, my personal choice would be, unless the dog is just so out of his head because the harness means we're going out, in which case I would generally stop all the movement toward going out. If he gets really bitey and out of his head, I would stop working toward going out. I might actually redirect him with some find its, give him a little bit of a focus, bring the harness out again, help him find a place where he can think when the harness is present. If it's just specifically, oh, this harness looks like a dandy tug toy, I would spend a lot of time with the harness over my arm, but my arm through the harness with a treat that's much closer to the dog. So the harness is present, but initially it's all about the treat in my hand. And then when he begins to get the picture of my arm is through the harness feeding him, then again, I can gradually have the harness a tiny bit, an inch closer to my hand. When he gets really comfortable with that, then I can have the harness another inch closer to my hand and go from there.
I wonder too, if once you start doing it this way, where you're luring him through, if he'll stop biting at it as much. Because I do think a lot of times that biting is because they don't like it over their head.
Right. I do too. I think there's a lot of anxiety surrounding it.
Yeah, so that may be where some of that biting is coming from.
Yeah.
Which of the two halters is the best for a small dog?
Boy, it really depends on his shape. I think of the Freedom harness as being kind of rounder, dealing with a dog who has a rounder chest. So I might be looking at a Freedom. Let's say I had a Chihuahua. They tend to have a little teeny tiny bully shape to their chest. I might be looking at a small Freedom harness for that, but a dog who's kind of shaped a little bit longer in their structure, I'd be looking at the Harmony harness.
Okay.
What kind of dog do you have?
I have a miniature 13-pound poodle, mini toy.
Yeah, I'd probably be looking at a T-Touch harness.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good.
So I have the Freedom harness, and my sister was looking at getting one. She has a 10-pound dog. They don't make one that small.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I know they have extra small, but I don't think they have extra small.
Yeah, I think the extra small goes to like 15 pounds at the smallest, but it's chest measurements. So
right.
she was just
It depends on proportion of the dog. But yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll tell you is that with if you look at the T-Touch harness, when you get into the extra small range, the clips are tiny. And so if you have a dog with, like that curly poodle hair, it may be a little challenging to snap them, in which case I'll sometimes even look to just a basic mesh sort of harness. I don't know how you feel about that, Marnie.
I think for the little tiny dogs, it's a lot less about the leverage than it is in a bigger dog. So I would go for a mesh harness, and I'd look for one where the clip attaches, closer to the shoulder blades, not so far down the back.
Okay, we got that. Got one of those. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Forward here.
Say again.
We should keep on moving forward here.
We should. Yes. Okay. All right. Take it away, Sarah.
Right. So in talking about harnesses, we started by talking about the two harnesses, the T-Touch and the Freedom. And as Marnie showed you, it has a clip on the front and the back in both cases, and we'll be looking a little bit about how you use that. We always get questions about the general front clip collars, harnesses, and head halters, and we want to just address those two things. A front clip harness, what we're thinking about when we're talking about that is like some of you might be familiar with the Easy Walk harness, where basically it has just a clip in the front, nothing on the back. And a lot of harnesses like that, or there's another one called the Sensible harness, you might be familiar with. What's good about it is that if you have a larger dog, clipping on the front changes the leverage. So if your dog pulls really hard and it's clipped on the front, it brings them around a little bit. They can't get quite the same amount of power. And if you clip just on the back, you can get sort of the sled dog mush. They can really get some good leverage. So the benefit of having, clipping your leash to just the front is just that. That said, you got to be careful because you're also kind of twisting them around a bit. And so I really think of harnesses and all of this gear as it doesn't replace the training, right? It helps you manage them while you're training, but it's not going to replace it. And ultimately, I think it's kind of nice to be able to just clip onto the back, once you've got all your behaviors in place. But these things are, can be very helpful along the way. The other thing about the Easy Walk and the Sensible and some of those harnesses is that they're very easy to get out of. And I experimented once with an Easy Walk harness with my own dog, and whoop, out she went. It's really simple to slip them. So I will say that the two that we recommend are much, 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 much harder to get out of. I used to say they're impossible, and then I had to eat my words with one of my clients. But they're very difficult to get out of. And you've got the option, if you want, of just clipping on the front. But at least you don't have to worry about them, getting out of it, and then you've got real problems. So again, I think after tonight it would be good to experiment a little bit, get some of the gear that you like, and see what works. And we'll be showing you a little bit more about particularly the double-ended. Oops.
Yeah.
Little echo here. Not sure where that's coming from. Make sure everyone is.
Oh, so it must be me.
Yeah, try to mute yourself for a second.
Unless it's you. Okay.
Well, that would be weird. I think that's better. It was you, Marnie. Okay. The head halter, I don't know if any of you are already using one. Marnie and I are kind of the same mind on this, and she can interrupt me and yell if she doesn't agree, but we've talked about this quite a lot. Head halters have their place, and what they can do is help guide your dog a bit. The problem with them is that if you hook to just that head halter and your dog takes off, their head kind of goes whipping around. I had a client who just put one on her dog without talking to me about it, and sure enough, didn't he just get right out of it too? The other thing is that most dogs absolutely hate wearing them, which is kind of understandable. So if you do decide to try one, you want to make sure that you're getting them comfortable with it very, very gradually, rather than just slapping it on. And believe it or not, some of those head harnesses say, "Joe, just put it on. You don't have to worry about it." That's crazy. If someone put something like that on my face, I would want someone to get me comfortable with it. So, a sudden pull can be kind of bad. So if you decide to use one as well, we would recommend using it in combination with a harness. So you'd have a double-ended leash. You'd clip one end to the back of the harness and one to the head harness, the head halter. And then basically what you're doing is the back clip on the harness is the load-bearing part of your setup. And the head halter, you use the lightest touch just to guide them. And I think it's tempting to kind of yank, and that's going to cause you more problems than it solves. And you run the risk of potentially injuring your dog. So Marnie and I, both feel like with the other equipment, you almost always can get what you want without having to go to a head halter. I think people jump to them much too quickly because we're always looking for equipment to solve our problems rather than training. That said, I have recommended it on a handful of occasions, particularly when I had an enormous dog and a tiny person, because it can help. It can help just a little bit with that. I tend not to jump to that first. Okay. Questions about that? Or Marnie, if you've got things you want to add to that.
Nothing to add, but we'll see if the echo's gone because I moved my speaker. It's
Okay.
like old times.
Oh, I know. That's better.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in complete agreement about the head halter.
Okay.
All right.
Keep moving forward.
Let's do. So we wanted to talk about equipment to avoid as well. I'm sure you all have seen a prong collar. That's a photo on this beautiful lab. It's got metal prongs that they're rounded on the end, but they stick into the dog's neck. And they work on the fact that if the dog pulls forward or if the human administers I'm making air quotes here, correction, they're creating intense discomfort, and the dog works to avoid that. The choke collar is the same. It's like a noose, and it compresses without stopping. A shock collar administers an electric shock. It goes by a number of euphemisms such as e-collar or stim collar, but know that despite the marketing language that they work because they shock the dog, and the dog adjusts behavior to avoid the shock. Any device that adds, that trains the dog, that shuts down a behavior through the application of something aversive, runs the risk of, in very short time, it can be a one-time learning event, it runs the risk of triggering aggression, absolutely runs the risk of increasing reactivity. I'm inclined to say that I would guarantee that it would do that. There will be a dog who makes a liar of me, but the odds are so high that if you use aversion to work with your reactive dog, that you will make the behavior worse. And it can also draw negative associations. Say, for example, your dog loves kids, sees their favorite toddler running down the street, wants to go say hi, and experiences any of these aversive techniques. Your dog can draw a negative association with the child. Let's say your dog wants to greet another dog, runs to the end of the leash, experiences this discomfort, and again, can blame that other dog, and it can negatively have a negative impact on his feelings about other dogs. So don't use them. They shut down behaviors. in a way that doesn't address the underlying cause or concern that your dog has. They can appear to be effective because of that, but they don't address the problem. So that problem is still there waiting to express itself. Flexi leads, those are the retractable leads that come in handles. We absolutely don't recommend them. They're, for one, it's not a meaningful connection to your dog for either you or your dog. For another, that tension that the spring mechanism puts on the lead teaches your dog to pull, because when your dog is on a flexi and moves forward, that spring pressure is moving back, so they begin to associate that pressure with what it takes to move forward. Admittedly, on a flexi, it's not, the level of intense pressure that a human might apply, but it does teach them, and rather quickly, that in order to move forward, they need to experience that pressure, and that if they experience that pressure, that they want to pull forward. The flexi as well. I always forget to mention this, and then Sarah corrects me. Let's see if I remember all the parts, Sarah. There is a not insignificant injury hazard to you and your dog from using the flexi. Deep cuts from the lead itself, amputations, which is gross and horrifying, but they're documented. Consumer Reports has a report on retractable leads, and they don't have stock in either the folks who make retractable leads or the folks who make alternative leads, so they don't have any axe to grind there, but it's well worth looking at. And when your dog is that far away from you, it's really easy to kind of lose track of what's going on, especially when they're at the other end of a flexi. Anything to add, Sarah?
Oh, no.
Okay, so I got all the parts. Excellent. Excellent. Any questions? I see we may have one in the chat. Oh, Nancy says, and a flexi can break. It absolutely can. It absolutely can. And if you go to grab the lead itself, that's where you begin to risk some serious injury. All right. Okay, so we have some resources. We're not going to go over each one, but we wanted to let you know that we have these links here. They're going to be in the slides. One is to the Harmony harness, one's to the Freedom harness, one is to a harness we didn't look at called the Perfect Fit. It's more of a customized harness, in that there are 3 different parts that fit together, and you take measurements and order each part separately, so that once you get it, it is fairly custom. And then 2 places that make leads that I like, the Mountain Dog Amazing Versatile Leash has a clip at both ends, and Bold Lead Designs make leather and vegan leashes that clip at both ends. So you will have that available to you.
Let me just add, if you are interested in a T-Touch Harmony harness and you are local to where we are and where Your Dog's Friend is in Rockville, you can actually arrange to pick one up there. So if you have any interest in that, what you can do is just email me, and I will put you in touch with the person who can help you set that up. We also carry Freedom harnesses. We're happy to do that as well. Although I have to say, Freedom harnesses are fairly ubiquitous right now. You can find it in a lot of the pet supply stores as well as online. The Harmony harness comes out of Canada, and they're not real speedy about sending them. And I can only imagine now with the mail as it is, it will only be worse.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and the shipping for a single harness from Canada is pretty steep as well. So.
That's it.
Okay.
Okay. So now what we want to do is look at some leash techniques to help you in managing your dog, particularly when you're working with them on things like click for looking, or it may be for some of the other leash techniques we've talked about. And we want to address first, if you're using a leash with just a single point of contact, whether it's, ideally it's not going to be on a harness and not a collar, as in this picture. but the basic idea is going to be very similar in that it attaches to one spot. One of the things that we find is that it's easiest to work with your dog if you have the leash in your dominant hand. So this guy with treats falling out of his head, he's right-handed. And not funny. He's right-handed, and he is holding the leash in his right hand, and he has his dog on his left, and he's rewarding with his left hand. So all he has to do is reach down to his side. He doesn't have to cross his body with the treats to get them to the dog, which can make it much, much more difficult and actually more confusing to your dog. It's a lot of upper body movement that can really throw them. You know, when you're dealing with click for looking and things like that, you want to be able to get the treats there pretty quickly after that click. You're going to want your hand right there. What this doesn't show all of that clearly, that sort of does. You'll notice that this guy is really close to the dog's head. And what we find is that it's really easy to find yourself water skiing behind your dog 6 feet away. And when you're working on click for looking or anything where you need to be actually working with your dog, you're going to have far more success if you're right there by their shoulder than if you're way behind saying, look over here, dog. You know, you just don't have very much influence from that distance. And so you want to make sure when you're working with them that you are up there. You'll notice too that the leash here is nice and loose. Now I realize if the dog isn't as happy as this dog, and suppose your dog reacts, the leash is going to go taut, right? But you know, your goal is not to pull back on it if you can help it. But when you're working with them, so say you're doing click for looking, you want to have a bit of slack in that leash, because as soon as you put pressure on it, it's going to make your dog more anxious. And I can't tell you how true that is.
Yes.
It really, it can, you know, I've had, I'll just leave it at that. It's really very true. So be really mindful. It's easy when you get nervous to start to pull tight on the leash. And so you want to be really mentally aware of that. Okay. Questions about that? These are all things you'll want to play with.
Yeah.
Would you have the clicker in the dominant hand then?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I would put the clicker in my leash hand. You can rest it right on top. It's actually quite easy to do once you get a feel for it. And you know, the other thing I think a lot of people really like is you can get those little here we go again. Those little wrist thingies. That's the technical term. Those little springy things you put around your wrist. Some people put keys and then put them on their wrist. I don't know what they're called. They're like $1 each. And put your clicker on that so that if you do have to let go, you don't have to go finding it. It'll be still right there. So you might find that helpful. But I actually find it's fairly easy to hold with the leash. You're just kind of resting it on the top. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you.
I meant to say it, and I didn't. Other questions before we move forward? Okay.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have, for 20 some years, I have always been walking with the leash in my left hand.
Mm-hmm.
If I can't teach myself to comfortably do the right, I feel like I'll have no control holding the leash on the right. I mean, is that okay? Or do I just really have to?
Well, yeah. You know what? If you're successful in what you're doing and you're able to do these techniques with it that way, don't mess with a good thing, right? If it's working, there's no reason to change it. But I guess, you know, if you haven't been all that wedded to how you've been doing it, you know, I would definitely do this. So, you know, what you might do is just play around with it a little bit and see. And if you try it and you're like, there's no way I can do this, I got too much muscle memory in place and it's just too hard, then, you know, then okay. There's no one way to do anything. We just find the stuff that we're recommending, we're finding tends to be the easiest and most effective.
Okay, thank you. I have one last thing. I have a Sheltie, and I also volunteer with the Sheltie Rescue. It's a martingale collar all the way. Granted, if she pulls too hard, there's a little gagging, but I tried a harness before, but because of the shape of their heads and their necks and their bodies, I just feel comfortable remaining with the martingale, especially when that's what everyone is like telling you to do for that breed. I trust that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, it wouldn't be my choice simply because of the pressure on the neck, because that pressure on the neck can over time result in a damaged thyroid, collapsed trachea, damaged spine. And also when a dog is pulling like that, they're cutting off their own air. And if you think for a moment what it feels like when you can't breathe, your body, whether you're aware of it or not, goes into panic when you can't breathe. And stress hormones go through their bodies, right? Even though they're pulling themselves, they can't breathe. Stress hormones go through their bodies, and it makes them much harder to think clearly because they're stressed, and it's putting them, if not over threshold, even closer to going over threshold. So I think there are considerable benefits to a harness, though I understand what you're saying. Someone just put a note in here, and Lisa says, I have collies and the T-Touch Harmony works really well. And in fact, I know two other people with collies who use the T-Touch, and it's been fine. I know that Shelties aren't exactly collies, but it's sort of similar body shape.
Yeah.
And so you might try it, just see what you think.
Okay.
You know, and if are you local to your dog's friend?
I'm in Virginia.
So, well, if you wanted to arrange to come over and try one, you could try it on, see what you think of it, and if you don't like it, just give it back.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for the collie comment person, whoever that was. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
What is your advice for getting a dog that likes to walk ahead of you to walk beside you without shortening the leash terribly?
You want to take Marnie's leash walking class.
You do. You do.
That's a whole other thing.
When we cross the street, he tries to get ahead of me, and I keep having to go slowly, but.
Well, remember you're carrying super duper high value treats with you.
Yeah.
That might help.
Okay.
But otherwise, it's sort of more than we can do here. Leash walking is its own thing. And honestly, Marnie is doing some online leash walking classes that are terrific.
Okay. I'll look for that.
Yeah, would love to have you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love the leash.
Okay. Onward.
Okay.
All right.
Speaking of which, my favorite video.
Yes.
Do you want to set it up, Sarah?
Yeah, go ahead and get it ready. So this is a technique. If you have a larger dog, if you have a really little dog, you probably don't need to be worrying about this too much. If you have a larger dog, you know that feeling where you're hanging onto the leash and they suddenly pull and it's like it slides through your hands. It's really hard to hang on to. And this technique called the finger lock is really good for that, so that you feel like you're not gonna, you won't feel like it's sliding through your hand, because it won't slide through your hand. And so this is just a quick video. There's no sound to it. But go ahead and, Marnie, you can go ahead and put it on if you want. And we can take a look and see.
Yeah. And I would say, so my smallest dog is like about 23 pounds. So that's not tiny, but I still use it with her because it keeps me from getting busy on the leash as well. There we go.
So what I would encourage you to do, if you're interested in learning how to do this, is to pull up this video when you get a copy of the slides and sit there with your leash. I have had endless laughs with clients over this because it looks really easy, but as soon as you try to do it, it's like, what? It's really,
Yeah, yeah.
it's not complicated, but you just have to kind of be able to visualize it. So you may want to look at the video and kind of do it along with the video. But once you get it, once you practice it, you know, a little bit, it's very easy to do quickly, but it does take practice.
Where the clip is, do we assume that's the handle?
Oh,
Yes.
yes, that's the handle.
Okay, thank you.
That's my funny leash.
Okay, anyone else before we move forward? Quick question. Okay, there we go. So we promised you some information on using a leash with 2 points of contact. So in this video, I'm demonstrating with 2 different dogs, a couple of different ways to use a double-ended leash. So let me get the video going again. I should have told you to bring popcorn today.
I know, it's a lot of videos, isn't it?
It's like movie night, yeah. There we go. Sorry, let me move that away. Okay, any questions about that? We actually managed to compress a whole bunch of different things into that video. So we showed you using 2 hands at first to kind of steer if you've got a dog who needs steering. And yes, the little dog needs steering way more than the bigger dog. It's, you know, but certainly if you have a really committed puller, you really want to make sure your hands are anchored around your waist and hip.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
If we're just like going on like a casual hike, no one's there, is it fine if they're in front of you, like just exploring, being a dog, having their time, good times? Like, is that
Yeah,
okay?
I think that's fabulous. Yeah.
Okay. Because I like, we have a national park near us, and so I take him on walks there, and he walks really nicely.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
no, I think that's great.
Yeah, I use a long line, like a 15 or 20-foot leash
Yeah.
when I'm doing hiking and stuff.
Yeah.
And even on a regular walk, Marty and I both feel really strong. You should let your dog do a lot of sniffing. So a lot of this stuff is, in preparing when you're working with a trigger and kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else? Let's see.
We have one in the chat box here.
It looked like I might. I'm going back and forth.
What
between
harness is the
apps.
cocker using?
She is, I don't know. I think it's Freedom Harness. So she has a Freedom and a T-Touch both. I think odds are that she's in a Freedom. She has a rounder chest than the English Shepherd, who is the one in this photo, and he's in a T-Touch harness for sure. So I'm pretty sure the cocker's in a Freedom harness. I can double check. Let me see.
So,
Yeah, I'm not gonna play the whole thing. Yeah, she's in a Freedom harness.
Yeah.
You can see it goes over the shoulders a little bit, little martingale clip on the back. Yeah, okay.
Okay, another something else in the chat box. Sometimes, this is Michelle, sometimes my dog lays down on the sidewalk when he sees other dogs. I use a harness leash, and I've tried to get his attention, but usually he doesn't budge until the dog comes or leaves his sight. What should I do?
So a couple of things. I think it maybe is more about strategy than about the leash in that case. Knowing that he does that, if I see another dog approaching on a walk, I'm going to preemptively work with my dog to go to a different place, go to a distance where, if dogs are his trigger, where you can be doing some of the click for looking work. I might also, if he's not so close to the other dog that there would be discussion about who owns the treats, I'd be playing find it before your dog is lying down. The time ideally to deal with this is, is before he's lying down. Anything to add, Sarah?
Problem.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, I think that's a great problem. I'd like to switch.
It can actually be really frustrating. I know.
Oh yeah.
I also find if you're really good about spotting the trigger, that dog before he does, and you do some click for looking right when he spots it.
Mm-hmm.
There, a lot of times you're going to be able to prevent him from lying down because he's looking at the dog, but he's engaging with you. And
yeah,
I've had some success with that.
Yeah.
Those guys who lie down.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to keep moving because we have got a lot to cover. So because you haven't watched enough video yet this evening, this is one more leash technique. It's called the balance leash. It's a short video. And so we'll look at the video first and then we'll kind of touch base on it.
So if you find yourself in a situation where your dog isn't in a harness, this is a technique you can use called the balance leash that can help make sure that you're not putting pressure on your dog's neck.
Right. And because Flim is pretty sensitive in the body these days, this is my go-to if we're in a situation where I think he might pull or have a reactive moment. So I take the leash, I put my hand a couple of inches above the clip, and you'll notice the loop and kind of the rest of the leash is in my other hand. I put my hand over, drop the leash, bring the handle up, take the pressure off the collar, and then just hold the leash against his chest. And then I give him a treat. Especially if this is new to your dog, they may find it all really weird to have the pressure against their chest. So giving them a treat the moment you do it is great. Why don't you stand, Flim, so we can show people? Good boy. Yes. There we go. And I can use a gentle pressure again to invite him to move. Limb this way. Nice. Just that little jiggle on the leash. It's not any kind of a harsh pressure. You could do it with your pinky. That's how soft the pressure is. And if you practice that with your dog, they'll get really responsive to it.
Oh, there we go. There's a lot of video to get out of. So the balance leash you might use if you're out and about with your dog for whatever reason, you've clipped it to his collar. At this point in Flim's life, he was uncomfortable with a harness because he had a lot of skin tags, and so I didn't put him in a harness if I could avoid it at all. Obviously, he had a lot of experience at this point working with the balance leash. So this gave me a way to prevent forward movement, to connect a little bit more strongly when he was in a flat collar. You can also use it if your dog is in a harness. It works especially well if your dog is in a back clip harness. And so it's just clipped on the back and it loops around to the front. I've even managed to make it work in a front clip harness, but that's a little bit like macrame as well.
You have a question in the chat box which says, can it slip and then wrap around the neck? Which is a good question.
That is a good question. So if you do it the way it is here, I mean, it could go around the neck as you, as your dog is kind of untangling. But the thing is, there's no knot. It's not tied on itself. It's just a little bit like, boy, I don't know exactly how to describe it. I mean, obviously, if it rides up and your dog is pulling forward, then you want to release the pressure and move it down. If that makes sense. So here, I think you can see my cursor. So this absolutely could ride up and it could put pressure on the throat the same way the collar does. And if it begins to do that, then you want to adjust to drop it further down on your dog's chest. It's not an arrangement that I would use for walking any great distance, but I might use it from my car into the vet, or if I've run into a store, for whatever crazy reason, have my dog with me. All of a sudden, it's like, ooh, there's going to be some desire to pull forward. I'm immediately going to put him in this position. And it puts you next to your dog's shoulder as well. So again, you're avoiding that water ski position where your dog's in front of you and you're trailing behind. Okay, anyone else? Anything to add, Sarah?
No.
Okay, but that's a great question because, safety first for sure. Yeah. And this is just a little infographic from Lily Chin that just makes it all really clear. The leash goes around your dog's chest. The handle is in one hand, the kind of loop where the leash attaches to the collar and then it goes around the chest is in the other hand. The big thing you want to be careful of is that you want to make sure that the part of the leash that goes to the collar isn't the part that's carrying the pressure. And that can be a little tricky. You want any pressure to be going across the chest, not on the collar. And that just involves being aware and adjusting. Okay. All right. Let's move on to setups.
All right, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. We talked last time a little bit about the idea of setups. So being able to work in a place where you're not going to get caught off guard. And, are you going to ever be 100%? No. Occasionally you're going to get caught off guard. But you can really up your odds considerably if you're kind of thinking about this ahead of time. So we want to make sure that we're doing our best to control the exposure to the triggers, that we're going to end up in the at an appropriate distance from the triggers. And we're going to be able to avoid what we call hot zones. And you'll see an example of one in just a second. You'll know exactly what I mean. Remembering too that, you know, setting your dog up to succeed and you as well, you want to be using high value rewards. And if you haven't done that yet, do it. It makes an enormous difference. It will make your training go so much more smoothly. And I actually find the higher value treat I use, the fewer treats I end up needing, because they're going to work harder for that higher value treat. And then the other thing is you want to make sure you have an exit strategy to get yourself out of situations. And Marnie talked a little bit about that last week, and she was talking about walking in downtown Toronto, you know, having looked ahead to find good exit places to exit to move away from triggers.
Yeah.
So let me just show you some photos I took to show you some of this. And I always like showing these because sometimes it kind of prompts ideas in your own head about places near you. You go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump the gun.
No, that's your fine. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So this is what do we call it? A red zone? Hot zone? What do we call it? I forgot.
I think hot zone.
So this is a place where you do not want to walk over that bridge because you have no idea what's coming. So if your dog is reactive to people or to dogs or to bicycles, all of those things can come flying down and across that bridge, and there you are. So that's kind of what we're talking about, narrow spaces where you can get trapped. Okay. Let's look at some really successful places where you could work with your dog. All right, so this is at the Cabin John Regional Park for those of you who are local. And this is a particularly good place to work, although I will tell you, do not right now go on a weekend. I made the mistake the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many people and so many dogs. I think largely because of COVID and everyone's trying to do outdoor stuff. It was a mob scene, and it was a nice day. But during the week, you could definitely work here, maybe at really off-peak times on a weekend or in the evening. And let me just explain. So if you follow the path straight all the way down, you'll see like, I don't know, 2/3 of the way back, you'll see a person with their dog, right? And then the path continues behind them, and that actually goes up into the dog park. But luckily, if you have a dog reactive dog, you can't actually see into the dog park. So you don't have to see all those dogs racing around. But there's a steady stream of people walking their dogs from the dog park off to the left, and just off the left of the off the frame is the parking lot for the dog park. So it's a great place, and you can get farther away. You can get further away than where I took this photo, so that you have some good distance and then can work on closing in the distance. The one thing I will tell you is if you decide to go to Cabin John, specifically for those of you who are local, don't park in the dog park parking lot if your dog is dog reactive, because you want to park someplace else in the park and walk to it. Otherwise, you're gonna have a really tough time. Okay, so that's a really great type of setup. Marnie, go to the next one if you would. This is also, and this is maybe more like places near you. There is a path. So if you look where the green tree is on the left, and you look right below that, there's actually a person there. Marnie, can you point to the person with your cursor? I'm doing it with mine, but no one can see it.
There we go.
Yeah, there's the person right there. And there's actually a path that they're walking on. It's really hard to see with the grass, but the path goes up. Marty, do you see where the path is?
There?
No, it goes up that little
Oh,
hill.
right there.
No, up further up, higher up. No, not in the tree.
So I guess I don't see it.
Okay, look where the look where the little goal post is over on the right.
There?
And follow. Yes, there it is. Ta-da! Yeah, that's where the path is. Okay, so I'm standing way back away from that path, and people are constantly walking along that path. constantly, I'm not as much as at the dog park, but a fair number of people walk their dogs in this park. And so I have plenty of room to move away if I need to, or move closer if I want to.
What park is that?
That is the Falls Road Park,
Okay.
just like the edge of Rockville and Potomac.
Alrighty, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I'm hoping, as you see things, you can kind of think of possible places where you could go that are easy for you to get to. Okay.
All right. So we have just one more thing to look at, which is what to do if your dog is overreacting. I know we've touched on this a lot, but let's say you go to one of these locations, you've chosen the best place you possibly could, you've got your exit strategy, but perfect storm, something comes, triggers your dog, and they're kind of out of their head. Because you will have practiced the backup recall and the U-turn in situations where your dog is not reacting and gradually raise the difficulty, then you will be able to use this as well. So the backup recall is where you walk gather up the leash as you walk close to your dog, and then you run backwards while using a really happy cue. In my world, it's pop, pop, pop. And then the U-turn is where you place yourself as you walk, guiding your dog in a U-turn. Again, you gather up the leash and walk around. Your dog is the center of the circle you're walking, and you're walking between your dog and the trigger. So those are two strategies if your dog's overreacting. And as we'll say again and again, you want to be next to your dog's shoulder. You won't have any influence if you're 6 feet or more behind your dog. Absolutely, the hikes that someone was asking about earlier in safe settings, there's no reason you have to be next to your dog. But when stuff's happening, you need to be right on it, or if stuff's likely to happen. Find it, which you all started at week number 1, and it sounds like some of you have been having some good success with it. That can be a great strategy when you're in an uh-oh moment, because if you've practiced that so that your dog likes it, it can be such a powerful behavior when you call out the find it cue and begin playing that game. And if they love it and you've practiced it a lot, they're likely just to engage in the game without much thinking about it. And there we go.
All right. And that brings us to the end. So homework this week, to keep practicing that U-turn and or backup recall at least 5 times per walk. And the reason we're suggesting this is because in order for it to work when there is a trigger present, you've got to practice it over and over and over again. And I'm sure there's somebody sitting there right now saying, it'll never work when there's a person that my dog's reactive to. It will if you keep practicing. So keep doing it. You want to keep practicing find it on your walks, because that too can get you out of a lot of jams. And management strategy. So thinking about making sure that you're not exposing your dog to triggers when you are not actively training. And that may be in your house or in your yard, right? So if you have a dog who looks out the windows and barks at everything going by, preventing that. It might be a strategy for making sure they're not reacting to things constantly in the yard. You want to be thinking about it, because every time they react, remember, they go over threshold and all those stress hormones go, and it takes 3 days for them to come down, which is going to make your walks even harder. So keep that in mind. Think about that. And that's all I've got. Marnie?
All right.
Excuse me.
Are there any questions? It sounds like there is one. Yeah.
So if either of our dogs is barking at the window or going nuts, then I should try to do the recall or the U-turn and stuff like that to distract them from that?
Go ahead,
If they're
Marnie.
barking from inside the house.
Yeah.
So I would I would start with the management strategy, which is I would prevent my dog's access to the window that they bark through, where they see the triggers, except when I'm already prepared to train. And then it's a wonderful training setup because you're inside, the trigger's outside, you can manage your distance. I think the backup recall, again, if it's like, oh, darn, I meant to close the shades. If the backup recall is well practiced, then that's a great opportunity to do it. Or a recall if your dog's come when called is good. Or even find it. You can find it and then use your game to guide your dog away from the window into a different part of the house.
Okay, and I think the backyard, it would seem impossible. Our fence line runs across a wooded area. We have deer and things in there. And it's just like constant barking.
That's very, very difficult. I will agree with you.
Oh, yeah.
I would probably just practice my recalls like crazy out there.
Okay.
So that you can call them off. I don't know. I mean, you could potentially go out there and do click for looking at deer. It's not impossible. And I've known some people to do it and be successful, but it's tough because you gotta always be out there.
Yeah.
Your dog will probably balloon up from all the trees.
Yeah, remember you're doing eensy teensy tiny little pieces.
I know, I do, but still, when a dog can only get like a third of a cup.
Oh, you got really, little dog.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, that's a lot harder. I agree with you.
Okay.
So I get a little crazy when I work with a little dog, and I'll take a clean pill splitter and I'll cut the dry food in half that my dog normally eats, and take those calories from their bowl. It's still obviously with a tiny dog, the amount of treats that you can use are more limited, but I get twice as much out of each kibble for taking the time to split it.
That's a good idea. Great.
And I've experimented. I have not had success cutting it into quarters, only into half. But let me know if you have success with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Gosh,
You're
a
welcome.
pill splitter, you could like cut up Cheerios into like 8 pieces.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So how do you set up a management strategy when there's no way to have them avoid being towards the front door hearing the knocks because your house is too small?
So it's the knocking that's setting it off?
The knocking, the sound of someone going up the stairs to our porch, you can hear it upstairs and downstairs, and the trucks coming up the court.
One thing I might try for all that sound, you could potentially do some training, some sort of sound counter conditioning, kind of like we talked about in the last class. But I'm also wondering if you could put some kind of white noise machine or something that would mask at least some of it. Probably not to trucks, but it might mask like the people walking. I'm trying to think what else I might try. I would try to mask as much sound as possible.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marty.
I was going to say, yeah, depending on how your dog responds to sounds on the TV, and your mileage may vary. For some dogs, they get it that it's not real, and for others, they're quite concerned about it. If your dog is a dog who's unconcerned by sounds on the TV, I might actually find some soundtracks, movies or something like that, that contain a lesser version of the sounds that bother your dog, and just have that going to camouflage the sounds from around your house as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea. You're a genius, Marnie.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Jen puts a comment, I found HTV works best for my dog. I love that.
HGTV?
Yeah.
All right. Well, keep the credit cards away. Yeah.
Don't give the dog the credit card. Other questions before we go? He takes enough of my money. Yeah, I agree.
That's the point.
I got that. Anybody else? It's 8:45 on the dot.
Whoa.
That never happens.
And especially with this particular class. Yeah, I mean, this, lesson
Those
3.
are awesome. Yeah.
All right.
All right. So you got your marching orders. Please feel free to send us photos, videos of anything. And, we're happy to answer questions in between classes and, use the Facebook group. And we will see everybody next week.
All right. Have a good week.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.
Selena,
Thank you.
Selena, you're funny. The dog saw a picture of the Roseanne cat.
Oh, is that Lizzie?
Oh, no, that's not Lizzie.
Oh, okay.
I was just looking at a note in the chat box.
Oh, okay. Oh.
All right.
Okay.
I missed the very beginning of the recording.
Oh.
I don't usually do that.
I'm sure it will be fine. How far in were we?
We were at the harness, right at the harness video beginning. I missed the T-Touch and Freedom Harness thing.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But-
It's probably fine. Yeah.
It's in the slides, so.
I
Yeah.
can't sign you out. I see leave. Okay. Thank you. Good night.
You're welcome.